God commands the believers to obey God and obey the messenger. But God also makes sure that the obedience to the messenger is linked to obeying the message he delivered and nothing else. This is confirmed in a number of Quranic verses that outline the duty of what God's messenger was. Obey God and obey the messenger. And if you turn away, then the sole duty of the messenger is a clear delivery of the message. Chapter 64, verse 12. So the obedience to the messenger and the delivery of God's message are linked in the same verse. So obeying the messenger does not mean that the messenger has additional teachings outside of the Quran. So then the question now would be, why does God say in the Quran to obey the messenger? It's necessary to question why God didn't just say, obey God. God commanded the messenger to say specific words to people. It was necessary for God to also tell the people to obey the messenger. There's a total of 332 verses in the Quran which God commands the Prophet Mohammed to say specific words to the people. In Surah Al-Baqarah chapter 2 verse 220, it says, "And they ask you, O Muhammad, about the orphans. Say, improving their affairs is best." So the Prophet had to say to them something. All 332 verses constitute the reason to why it is necessary for God to command the believers to obey the messenger. The Quran was revealed to a prophet in order to deliver it to the community which was mostly populated by idol worshippers as well as followers to the previous scriptures. So obeying the messenger does not mean that the messenger issues additional teachings outside of the Quran for one to subscribe to the prophet's new teachings, because there are no new teachings. To follow the prophet's diet regimen, what side he sleeps on, or how many dates he eats when he breaks his fast, takes away from what God said was the sole duty of the messenger. There's definite value in having a prophet around that one can get direct answers from, but not enough to form an entire faith around how the prophet went about doing his day-to-day life. That wasn't God's plan. Especially when the book was delivered. The book of God claims to be sufficient enough for all mankind with answers to all things. An easy book to understand, without the dependency of opinionated scholars, and to put your faith in God and not in man. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. If the case was to build a religion around the prophet, God would have made it so clear to everyone in his fully explained book that has explanations to all things. But he didn't. So why wouldn't God mention that we have to follow the Sunnah of the prophet in the fully explained book that God delivered to mankind for guidance? Maybe because there is no Sunnah of the prophet that we have to rely on, based on God and based on the religion that we're supposed to be following. I mean, we are following the same God, right? So my question to you is, who told you that there's a Sunnah other than God's Sunnah? Because if we follow the same God, let's see what God has to say. Such was the Sunnah of God. For those who passed before, you will find that there is no substitute to the Sunnah of God. So in this fully explained book, why is it not explained that we must follow the Prophet's Sunnah? Why would the Prophet tell the people not to document any hadiths and to only write down the Quran? Why did the Prophet order people to burn the hadiths? Why were the Sahabas, after the Prophet passed away, did not take on any hadiths for 150 to 250 years after he passed? Because it's irrelevant to one's salvation. And if he wanted us to follow a messenger in anything other than delivering the message, which is the Quran, he would have never left mankind without a messenger, which we haven't had in 1400 years. God didn't want us to follow the messenger in his daily practices. Instead, God made it clear that the sole duty of the messenger was to deliver a message. Once it's done, you're gone. Using common sense, one can easily identify the truth from falsehood. If God was just, and if we were truthfully trying to find God, one has to use common sense. And if it doesn't make sense, and it makes God in a way that's not just, then it can't be true. If I was to die and somebody was to die from back in the day, I could easily in front of God say, well, you gave him a prophet. I never had a prophet. So that's easy leverage for God to give me more forgiveness than him. It's either God is just or God is not just. God is not going to put you in a position to not be on equal playing fields. So then, was the prophet relevant in the fact of Sunnah? Clearly not. For me to follow the prophet's Sunnah, God says there's only one Sunnah, which is the God's Sunnah. God never said in the Quran to follow the ways or the daily ways of the Prophet. And the only and the sole duty of the Prophet was to deliver the message. And if God was just, which he is, he would have left us a prophet right now, which we haven't had in 1400 years. So the question now is God just? And if he is just, we shouldn't emphasize too much on the prophet, but more so the message that he delivered. And that's all I got. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, share the video, and if you didn't, oh well.